Hi guys, it's Lily,
And this is Clover.
and welcome back to
All the tea we cannot sip.
it has been the longest week ever, and I won't lie, we're having some technical difficulties, but we are figuring it out.
Yes, we
And
have to figure it out for March
I know we've
Memoir
done so
Madness.
much work for this, so it's working out
Yeah.
now. It has been a long week, and it is the beginning of the week.
Yes. I was gonna say, I was thinking about it today, and like in the last 60 days, I've probably been fully staffed only 5 of them, and I'm feeling it.
Oh, that's the
And
worst.
coworkers keep coming up to me this week like I'm the freaking assistant manager or like I'm the next step down when our supervisor's gone, and I'm not. I'm like, we are equal. That's why she gets paid $30,000 more a year than I do. And you're a grown up and can make your own decisions. Look at your schedule, figure it out. I have no patience for it this week.
I hate that. I have coworkers that do that to me, like ask me questions, and I'm like, we get paid the same amount. Go ask somebody else.
Yes. God. I bought myself some garlic and herb goat cheese and a coffee because I deserve it.
You do. I bought some cheese over the weekend. I think I sent you a picture,
Mm.
but it's this like European cheese spread, and it's just so good. Cheese makes everything
It
better.
looked delicious. It
Ugh.
does.
And I bought the marinated mozzarella balls.
Oh, I almost got those. It looked delicious.
Oh, they are so good. Yes, well, I don't have a lot to say about my week. I burned myself with a pot pie over the weekend. It's just been a whole mess. I
Oh,
started
how's
my
it
period.
doing?
It's really red, but it doesn't hurt as much anymore.
Oh, did any of the skin come off?
No, it's like really dry. It's peeling a little bit, but not super, super bad. It,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but it's like I have a half sleeve and it's on the back of my tattoo, kind of. So it kind of looks like it's part of my tattoo, where I have some pink in my tattoo. So it's not super noticeable, but it super hurt. I got out of the shower and I told my husband, I said, I washed my burn with Dial and it doesn't feel better. And he was started laughing because he was like, I thought
Mm,
you were gonna say it feels better. And I was like, but it doesn't feel better. But
yeah.
I
You
put
probably killed some germs, which is good because you don't want it to get infected.
yeah, that's what I was thinking because I like to use, and I didn't want to put any scent on it because I like body or I use bar soap, but from Lush, so it does have, even though they're natural scents, it's still scent, and I feel like that could just
Hmm.
burn it even more since it's raw skin.
True.
So,
Especially a lot of Lush soap has like moisturizers in it, and you do not want to put lotion on a fresh burn.
no, I know I knew you'd understand because you've had some
Hmm.
bad burns in the day, and I said,
Oh,
ow.
yeah. Not compared to some people, but definitely some big ones.
Yeah. Mostly the biggest burns I've ever had are like sunburns. I have had second degree sunburns before, and that's not fun.
Hmm.
But we are getting into Memoir Madness, March Madness memoirs. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it should be good. We've posted the agenda of what books we're going to talk about on what days if you would like to read or listen with us. And I think in the future, we would love to be able to do live stream podcasts, especially when we read books. It'd be really cool to have a book club and have people interact with us. But we have to have 1,000 followers to live stream from YouTube. So be sure to subscribe if that's something you're interested in.
That would be a lot of fun. We love reading books and talking about them, and I would love
Mm-hmm.
to interact and, talk about questions or points that other people have about the book because I love putting my opinion on things.
Yes, me too.
So I was gonna say this week is a little bit different format than the rest of the month because we both read two different memoirs, and then the next couple podcasts we'll be talking about the same memoir that we read. So I'm really excited for this one because there's two different people we get to learn about and talk about.
Yeah, good point. I haven't read the book you're talking about today, and you haven't read the one I read, so it'll be cool to learn new things and see your perspective on what I learned.
Yes, and maybe I'll get this. I wonder if, because you are going to talk about Yearbook by Seth Rogen, I wonder if he did the audiobook because it seems like a lot of memoirs are read by the people that wrote them, and I think it would be really fun to listen to him.
I do think he did the audiobook. That's not what I listened to, because I already had it on ebook. But I was thinking that too, that it must be extra funny when he's reading it, because as I was reading it, I could hear it in his voice. He wrote it the way he speaks.
I love that. You can tell when somebody is writing something that doesn't sound natural to their personality,
Absolutely.
especially when it's a memoir.
Which some celebrities put out memoirs that are ghost written. And I didn't feel like this one was, which was cool.
So exciting. And I'm going to be talking about Sorry Not Sorry by Naya Rivera. It, I actually reread it for this podcast. I read it quite a few years ago before she died. I read it. And I wanted to get the audiobook, but like you, I already had the digital version
hmm
on my Kindle and I couldn't justify spending another $20 on a book that I already had.
Did it hit different now that you read it after she's died?
Yes, because I actually wrote this down because it really stuck out with me. In part of her book, this is a quote from it. It says, I plan to live a long time, and I want each stage of my life to get progressively more fancy.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. So that part, I was just like, oh, of course, she could have never known what was going to happen because it really was a freak accident.
hmm
She died by drowning, and I've almost drowned. It's horrific, and my heart just goes out to her family. She is very loving with her family and her son, and reading that, it just made me think about her parents and her siblings and her child and her relationships with other people, and it did hit different.
It is chilling when you read quotes where people talk about their plans and then they die. Like it reminds me of that Alan Rickman who played Snape, if you're not a Potterhead like us. But he said, when I'm 80 years old and sitting in my rocking chair, I'll be reading Harry Potter, and my family will say to me, after all this time, and I'll say always. And I always think of that because he didn't make it that far.
Oh, I know.
And
Which
she was really young. How old was she when she died?
Naya Rivera was 33 when she died.
Damn. What did she mean by she wanted each stage of her life to get fancier?
In the context of the book, she does talk about the different stages of her life. She was a child actress. Her first job was when she was 7 months old in a Kmart commercial. And
Wow.
then she was on some sitcoms. She was on there was a sitcom for only one season. It was called The Royal Family, and it was with Red Fox, who was on The Jeffersons.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when she was 5. And Red Fox actually had a heart attack in front of her
Oh my gosh.
when she was 5. And so the show did not continue on. And it just, and then she went on to do a couple guest spots on The Fresh Prince. and Family Matters. Not big parts, but she had a reoccurring role on Family Matters. But after that, most child actors and actresses, they have the Coogan account, which is money that
Mm-hmm.
cannot be touched. And there were just points in her life where her parents really struggled. And then when she had graduated high school, she got her money and she really wanted a boob job, so that's what she used some of her Coogan money on, and she just spent the rest and you
Damn.
know frivolously, and she ended up having her car repossessed and kicked out of her apartment. And so she was just saying that each stage she just wants to be more fancy, and not always with like material things, but the way she carried herself and just how she lived and how she saw life. She wanted it to become a better version of who she was previously.
Wow. I'm looking at some pictures of her when she was little and she was so cute.
I know. She did talk about how when she was an older kid, you know, about puberty age, it was very hard for her to even get auditions because that's an awkward stage for every kid.
Totally.
And, you're not the cute little kid, but you're not quite old enough to play like a sexy love interest or, like
Mm-hmm.
a hot kid, which that sounds gross, but that's not what I mean. But, like an attractive high schooler or
Right.
that
Like
type of
Hannah
thing.
Montana, iCarly, those kind of shows, which also never had a person of color as the main character.
That's
So I'm sure
true.
that was working against her too.
Yes, because she was half Puerto Rican, a quarter black, and a quarter German.
Mm-hmm.
And so she even talked about how she was able to play a lot of characters in commercials that, sometimes she was playing a Latina, and sometimes she was playing an African American, and sometimes she was playing a white character. And those things are all true about her. But I think
Yeah.
as you grow older and you're looking for more titular roles, if that's how you say that word, I'm not quite sure. I think it is. Um, it's a, it is, I mean, Lizzie McGuire, all those shows had white child actors
Yeah.
as the main protagonist.
And getting your first job at 7 months old, you don't consent to that. That I can't imagine what that would feel like to just kind of be born into a job.
Yeah, well, she did talk very fondly about it, that as she grew older, preschool age, that she was very excited to work, that it uh, it was something she wanted, which is not
Mm-hmm.
really what you hear a lot from, because at 7 months old, obviously your parents are making your decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but so many kids are, guilted into acting, I feel
Yeah.
like. So it was refreshing to read a story where she was excited to act and she wanted to.
Good that she enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that law exists where I don't know if it's 15 or 20% of a child actor performer's wages has to go into that fund until they're of age. But thank goodness that exists.
It exists because of, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Coogan, and his parents squandered all his money away and he died like penniless or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so they made those laws so that parents couldn't do that. But my husband and I were talking, those rules aren't the same for parents that are making money off their kids on the internet.
No, that's something I've seen talked about recently on YouTube of how those kids don't have any of that protection and they should. And I'm sure that society and companies are starting to go towards that. But yeah, it's sick. All these family bloggers exploiting their kids is really gross.
I don't even watch. I know of some of the big ones, because of like controversies, but I've
Right.
never actually watched a family blog.
I don't either. The same. I've like hate watched some because I've seen lots of controversies, and something that's really popular right now is people exploiting their foster kids or kids they adopted.
That's
And that's a
disgusting.
great thing to do. Like, we need more
Yeah,
foster parents, and there are so many children who need good homes, but you shouldn't be telling their like back sob story or putting them in front of a camera to make money. And are those kids getting that money? You might not, those kids might be reunified with their families and they might not even be in your family in a couple years, but you're making money off of them. I
I
don't see
think
how that's legal.
I don't either, and I think that people do that like so that people tell them that they're good people and they're doing a good thing. I just
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you don't need strangers to validate you,
Mm-mm.
and I think that's what they want.
I've seen a lot of ex foster kids and adopted children, and that's the number one complaint I've seen is that their parents had like the savior complex and they just loved being told what good people they were and how much better their kids' life was. And yeah, straight from the mouths of the kids who have lived through that. They say it makes them feel really bad. It makes them feel like their past experiences are being erased and that they should just be grateful. Whereas all the grief and pain that can come from adoption and fostering, they're just expected not to recognize it or talk about it. And it's sad.
Because it's almost like, oh, you should be grateful that we're doing this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
you can't be upset, and that's so wrong. I feel
Mm-hmm.
every emotion is valid,
Mm-hmm.
especially to children. I think it's so wrong. We've talked about this many times that society expects children to behave and manage their emotions when most adults cannot do that.
I know. And I even find myself falling into that sometimes. Like, why are you so upset? This is a small problem. But I need to remember it doesn't feel small to a child.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm perfect either. I definitely have felt the frustration of like, snap out of it. Like,
Mm-hmm. Or quit
ev
being so ungrateful.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I'm like, who are you talking to like that? Not me. You got me fucked up. But yes, it is very hard. But like you said, I'm glad that that exists because, you know, even though she didn't do what what other people would have done or what her parents wanted her to do. Ultimately, it was her choice, and she did what made her happy. She got a boob
Yep.
job.
Yep.
And I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing. I wanted a boob job when I was 18.
Mm-hmm. And at
So,
least, like you said, she had a choice. And obviously, she learned from that. Like, she felt dumb once her money was all gone and her car was being repossessed. And that is an incredibly valuable lesson. And it sounds like it didn't like negatively affect her life too much. Like, she wasn't homeless.
no. And that's very important. And I don't think because at the end of each of her chapters, she writes a list of things that she's sorry for and things that she's not sorry for.
Oh.
I think it's really cute. I don't think she's sorry about the boob job because she had quite a bit of money. I think she said $42,000, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the boob job was like 6 or 8,000. Um, the rest she just like spent at the mall, like on juicy tracksuits and Von Dutch trucker hats, and
That's so early 2000s.
it really is. And that's what she regretted about it is that she signed a lease on an apartment that she couldn't afford because she
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be live by herself. Then she bought brand new furniture for a place she couldn't afford, and she had to break
I
her
see.
Yeah, she had to break her lease at 6 months and, went into debt because she couldn't pay that money. When you break a lease, you usually have to pay an early termination fee and lose your deposit and all that stuff. So those were the things that she was sorry for.
Interesting. So how did she segue from that into Glee?
She did start going on more auditions. She talked about auditioning at Disney, and she basically called them out because they were like, "Oh, you're doing such a good job," or "You're so great," and she was like, "Then why don't you ever book me?"
Mm-hmm.
Because she had auditioned for like the Bratz movie and Cheetah Girls and High School Musical
Oh, she would have been great in the Bratz movie.
and Cheetah Girls.
Yeah. I don't know who you would get rid of in the Cheetah Girls, though.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do know.
And so she was still going on auditions, and she actually ended up going to film school in New York for a little bit, and she finished a year, I think, and then she only had maybe a semester or two left before she could transfer to a 4-year college, but she moved back to California, where she was from, and she ended up auditioning for Glee, so she didn't finish her film degree, but we talked about Glee in our last podcast. It was such a big thing. And that's one thing she talked about in her book is at first she wasn't very excited about it because the character originally didn't have a speaking role. It was just in the pilot as kind of a sidekick cheerleader.
Oh,
And so she wasn't super excited, but then when she found out it was created by Ryan Murphy, she loved Nip Tuck, so she was getting more excited and she was like, "Oh, how can I, make the camera on me more?" So that's how she like kind of sat in the background with her attitude so the camera would zoom in on her more. And then she got, a song and more speaking lines and became one of, even though she was part of the pilot, I feel like she became more of a main
character.
character. Yeah, a main character in the middle of season one.
That's so smart.
And yeah, she's done so many things. Like she worked, she did cold calling for like timeshares, and I don't know if you've ever done cold calling. I did it for about 4 days before I quit.
Yeah, I had to do it like 1 or 2 days back in the day, and I hated it.
Me too. It's absolutely terrible. She said that she was pretty good at what she was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but I still, couldn't do it. And she worked at Abercrombie, and I thought this was interesting, and I wanted to talk about this part, is that she needed a job that paid more, and she had worked at Abercrombie when she was like in high school, and then when she was 19, she needed a job, and she needed it to pay more. So she applied to be a manager at Abercrombie, but most retail, if you want to be a manager, unless you work your way up from a young age, you need a bachelor's degree. So she lied on her resume saying that
Oh,
she had a bachelor's degree, that she had taken early college courses when she was in high school and was able to be 19 with a bachelor's degree basically.
wow.
And
See, I've
I'm
never had the guts to lie on a resume.
mean
But
either.
then for a job like that, like what are they going to do? Sue you?
I
Ruin your reputation and you'll never get to work at another Abercrombie?
Ex- and I feel like I don't want to say you don't have to be qualified to do those jobs because you have to have a lot of skills that I don't think I possess. But I also don't think that they should solely base things on, especially in a job in the mall, they should not base things
Right.
solely on education.
Yeah, who the hell goes to college and wants to work at the mall if they have a choice?
Well, when I worked at Target over 10 years ago, all the team leads had bachelor's degrees, and I'm like, why'd you go to college to work at Target?
Right. I mean, I know when I graduated from college, a lot of the people I graduated with did end up working at the mall because the economy was so bad.
Yes, and
I'm like, what a waste.
it seemed like the people that I worked with, I'm not speaking for everybody that has a degree and works at the mall or works at a chain retail store, that they're I just felt like the people I worked with wanted to stay there. Like they had plans on staying there, that they
Hmm.
wanted to be store managers someday. And I'm like,
Wow.
well, there's 10 of you, and there's probably, you know, 10 targets in this area. Like, and those already have store managers, so either you're gonna have to relocate or you're not gonna get that position ever.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's just never been my calling. I've never liked working retail really. But I do know I have someone in my family who has worked at Costco for quite a few years and plans on staying a long time because I guess once you're there long enough, a lot of these big companies do have pretty good benefits and scheduled raises, and you can really work your way up. It's just not something that interests me. And I've heard really bizarre stuff about working at Abercrombie in general and just the really strict rules they have on what you have to wear, what your hair and nails can look like. You have to wear makeup, and that it's really hard for people of color to get hired at all, and definitely not management. So good for her.
Yeah, and I worked at the mall when I was a teenager. Not, I worked outside. I worked right outside of I worked in a kiosk type thing, but it was right outside of Hollister. And I knew somebody that worked at Hollister, and they were Asian, and basically they had to wear all the same clothes. You have to buy their clothes. You have to wear their clothes. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to somebody, my hairdresser that just did my hair was telling me that they have like posters in the back of how everything's supposed to look and how you're supposed to have one side of your shirt tucked in and certain buttons unbuttoned, and but they make this friend that I had who was Asian, they had her in the back like folding shirts, like not on the floor with customers. And
That is sick.
yeah, and I think, like you said, they did not hire people of color very often, and when they did, they were not
The
in the
same.
line. Yeah, they were not in the line of customers because they had like an image that, that obviously if they had big posters like the size of the wall of how you're supposed to dress.
So stupid. And I'm sorry, who gives a damn about Abercrombie or Hollister these days? I've worked at high schools. I do not see kids wearing it.
No, but it was very big at the time that she
It
worked
was.
there and when we were in high school even.
Yeah. Yep. It just goes to show how things ebb and flow.
So
Oh,
crazy.
so okay, so she got hired at Glee. What other interesting things did she share?
I thought it was interesting. She talked about she was engaged to Big Sean. The infamous I Don't Fuck With You song was written
Really?
about her, yes. Um,
Wow, that's tea.
yeah. And she, I guess it was pretty toxic. Quite a few of her relationships were toxic. She was with Mark Salling, also of Glee, for 3 years on and off, and that was very toxic. And she basically was very surprised when all the, news came out about his activities that were very disturbing.
Who was
And
he in Glee?
he was Puck. He was the one that
Oh,
was, yes, he was caught with child pornography. A
I
lot of
didn't know
it.
they were together.
Yeah, they dated for like 3 years.
Wow.
And um, she basically said she knew Big Sean wasn't the one because she was in London with him he was on tour, and she got the call that Corey Monteith had died, and she woke him up crying, and he was just like, "Oh damn, that sucks," and he went back to sleep.
Oh my God.
So she called like her Glee co-star and just went out into the hall and sat on the phone with them while they cried together because the way she talked about Glee, especially in the beginning, they were all very, very close and they did a lot of things together, like dressing
Mm.
up for Halloween, like group costumes, and just lots of parties. She said her first trip to Paris was with Diana Argon, who plays Quinn in Glee. So they were very close, which makes, and there was actually a part in her book that really made really made me sad because she was talking about talking with Corey and he asks her, um, how do you just start crying? And she says, I dwell. I'm a dweller. Use your shitty experiences. It's like therapy. It's awesome. And he said, oh man, I can't do that. I can't go there. You want to know what I do? I open my mouth for a really long time like I'm gonna yawn. It makes my eyes water. It was a sweet moment, but I look back and wonder what kind of pain he was blocking out even then.
Oh,
And
that is sad.
because he had been open about his problems with drugs and alcohol, but she was saying how he didn't really drink ever, and then one night on his birthday he ordered a drink, and everyone she said that everyone he noticed that everyone noticed that he ordered a drink and he was like, "Oh, I don't think I have a problem. I think I can drink moderately now." And I don't want to say that somebody doesn't know themselves because I don't know, but I think that's also a big sign is when somebody that is in recovery thinks that they can do just one thing that they really, really struggled with. And it's just really sad.
So, did he struggle with alcohol before Glee? I don't know anything
Yeah,
about that.
he did. He
Oh,
he was actually a heroin addict too before Glee, and
wow.
he had gotten sober and went on Glee, which he was not very old. So to have been a heroin addict so young and then to have gotten sober and then I think it said he started using again around the end of the third or fourth season, pretty close to when he
Dang.
died. He started using again, and the thing about especially opiates is your body doesn't you build up a tolerance over time, but your body does not keep that tolerance as you
Mm-hmm.
become sober. So a lot of people that overdose on opiates, it's because they relapse and they take the amount that they were taking when they stopped. And your body just
Yeah,
can't handle that. It shuts down your respiratory system basically, and you stop breathing.
that makes sense. Oh, so sad. So, oh, who is the father of her child then?
His name is, she was married to an actor named Ryan Dorsey. I'm not that familiar with him, but he was in shows like Ray Donovan and Justified, which I know my husband has watched, so I probably have seen him. But their relationship, they actually dated for 3 months in 2010. And she, in her book, talks about she got pregnant during that time, but she had already broken up with him because she was young and she was just like, he's too good, kind of, and
Oh,
was like, I have to break up with him before he breaks up with me. And so she had an abortion and she didn't tell him until 4 years
wow.
later. And she actually wrote about it in her book that she made him sign uh, an NDA before she told him because she didn't know how he was going to react. And that was during like the peak of Glee. And she was kind of trying to protect herself, I think, and just didn't want him to get mad and leak it to the press. And because the only person that knew at the time was her mom, because her mom
Mm-hmm.
had taken her and helped her during that time. It was actually really hard for her to get a day off of Glee. And
She was
she,
on Glee when she was pregnant.
yeah, well, with
Wow.
their first child that she did have an abortion with, and she had to go back to work the next day.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine how hard it is to even make that decision.
And that's what she talks about. And she said in interviews that she wrote about her experience to destigmatize abortion because she wrote about how you're going to be judged either way. Like a young single mother, you're judged. Have an abortion, you're
Mm-hmm.
judged. And that's something we've talked about. Having one kid, you're judged. Having too many kids, you're judged. Not wanting kids, you're judged. It's not up for other people to speculate on. And they
Right.
do. And I drive past an abortion clinic every day on my way to work, and there are people that protest. And sometimes they're out there at 7 in the morning. And I'm like, don't they have something better to do with? They could be giving their time to other people that really need it, like the homeless or, children that were born that are in horrible
Mm-hmm.
situations. And so she told him, and I really like how he responded. He basically told her that I wish you would have told me so I could have been there for you. But he wasn't
Mm.
upset, and she was very scared when they planned their pregnancy with her son, and she was very scared just of how she felt internally about replacing the child that she had aborted and those
Mm-hmm.
feelings, and that how happy she was that she was able to be a mom.
That's so sweet. It,
Yes.
yeah, it's so complicated, and I've told you this before, but I'll say it again. I've always considered myself pro-choice. Like, I don't know personally if I would have an abortion. I could never know what I would decide until I'm in a position to make that choice, right? Which I haven't had to yet. But I'll never forget when a few years ago, when one of my coworkers confessed to me that she had had an abortion and she was married, already had a kid, and cheated on her husband. They were close to divorce and just not in a good place. And she had a relationship outside of their marriage and got pregnant and had to confess to her husband. And she did get an abortion. And I was judging her, sitting there listening to her, judging her in that moment. And I had to check myself because it was that moment where my beliefs were truly challenged. And I was like shocked at myself.
At
And
le
I thought about it more and like I felt really honored that she did trust me with that. And I saw how much it still affected her, like made her sad and how hard of a choice that must have been. But yeah, you're so right that women are judged no matter what.
and at least you were able to see that in yourself and realize that your judgments were in that moment were not valid,
Mm-hmm.
and that you didn't shame her because of it. Because there are
Yeah.
lots of people that you probably think you could trust, and if you tell them something that they don't believe in, like you had an abortion or even you cheated, they're going to tell you like what a piece of shit they think you are. And
Yeah.
so at least I applaud you for realizing that about yourself, that you were able to realize that you were judging her, and also
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, and
Not express it.
yeah, I feel like I have judged somebody that has had an abortion, but it's because of a question she asked me before she got it, because I had recently had a miscarriage, and she asked
Mm-hmm.
me, she she didn't want a baby with the man that she was with ended up being an abuser, and he abused children, and I don't blame her for not wanting to bring a baby into that, but she asked me, "How did you make yourself miscarry?" and I was highly offended.
That is very offensive.
So when she got the abortion, I was still salty about that question. It wasn't about
Right.
her actual abortion. It was about her lack of compassion to see that I got married. Like I was married. I wanted a baby, like I wanted that
Yeah,
baby. It was a different situation, and
totally.
I don't think you can just throw that on somebody.
And as if like you're the authority, like you're not a doctor, like you don't work at a clinic, you're not
No.
even a voodoo mama who could tell her what herbs to eat or anything, you know, like
Exactly. I was
tone deaf.
18.
Totally
Like,
tone deaf.
yes. So, uh, but I read this and sorry, not sorry, that Naya's first boyfriend was actually Taj Mowry.
No.
Yes, they met on a commercial shoot when they were like 4, like in preschool, and their moms became really good friends. And they dated on and off for a long time until they dated, it was like her first kiss, and he actually said to her that he wanted to break up with her because he wanted to date somebody that was more, he wanted to date somebody that was on a similar financial level as him because her family was poor.
Oh God.
I know.
That's so gross.
So, but he was a really cute kid.
Oh gosh, I was just thinking about Smart Guy the other day because I want my son to watch it because he's part black and I want him to grow up and feel proud of that. And that was such a good show. Like it was almost an entirely black cast, black main characters, and he was super smart. They had a good family, and I almost feel like a lot of television has taken a step back. I almost feel like there was more inclusion in the 90s and early 2000s than I see on TV right now, at least in kids' shows.
Yeah, that is because his twin sisters had their own show that he had guest
Hmm.
starred on and then got his own show.
Yeah, they were
But
kind of like royal family in Hollywood.
yes, and there was also that So Raven. There were quite a few shows with people of color as, you know, main characters and main
Hmm.
families, and not just like Seventh Heaven was all white people, and then they had like I remember Gabrielle Union was on Seventh Heaven as another minister's daughter that was friends with the dad on there, and I'm like, well, you're just trying to throw in just the tiniest bit where you can without,
Yep,
and that's how I feel a lot of shows are even now.
I agree. I do think a lot of movies and television is more inclusive. Like just the other day, my husband and I watched, it was a movie called You People. Um, Jonah Hill plays this guy who runs a podcast with his best friend who is black, and they talk about a lot of social issues and stuff like that. And he ends up dating and getting engaged to a black woman. Eddie Murphy plays her dad. She's not an actress I've seen before, so I don't know her name, but it was so good. Like it was perfect mix of comedy, but also real issues and just how his white Jewish family clashed with her black family because her dad was like, Black Panther, Muslim. Her mom was very smart, successful black woman, and being black was such a big part of their lives and their identity. And I just loved how it gracefully talked about real issues and it wasn't all like Sunday with a cherry on the top at the end. It was very realistic and very good and entertaining. But
I
I
saw,
haven't seen many movies like that.
yeah, I saw the trailer for that on Netflix, I think, or one of
Mm-hmm. Yep, it
maybe it
was
was
on
HBO.
Netflix.
Oh yeah, and I thought it looked good. I like Jonah Hill a lot.
Me too.
Uh, which that was gonna bring me to, I was just thinking how small Hollywood is. Like, there's so many people in Hollywood, but you were just talking about how Jonah Hill was in that movie with Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy created the show, The Royal Family, that Naya Rivera was on. And
Oh.
actually, one time, Naya went over to Big Sean's house and she walked in and Ariana Grande was there. She doesn't say Ariana Grande, but she was like, in her book, she says, you can guess who, but it rhymes with Shmariana Schmonde if you're having trouble, who was also on a show with Jeanette McCurdy, who we're going to be talking about
April
in,
2nd.
yes, for our Memoir Madness. And I just think it's so crazy how small Hollywood is.
Oh, yeah.
And
And it's kind of small by design. Like, you really have to know people
that's true.
and not piss them off.
Yeah, that would be hard.
I'd be screwed.
Ugh, which I know, which Naya Rivera talks about pissing off one of the producers of Glee and basically telling him like he's not doing a good job because they were trying to shoot a scene and Leah Michelle had a tantrum and locked herself in her trailer and was like, what are we doing? Like, you're on my mark. You're gonna let her act like that. Where are the background actors? Like, what are you doing? And it's there were
Ooh.
rumors that she was getting fired, but she didn't.
I was wondering if she touched on her relationship with Leah Michelle because I have not heard good things about the two of them together. And I especially haven't heard good things about Leah Michelle's attitude and how she acted on set. So, does the book talk about that?
She brings up a couple instances. Um, so she talks about how on one of the seasons, Chris Colfer had a request that he wanted to have Tim Conway come on with his dogs, an actor, and Leah Michelle freaked out about the dogs and was like demanding hand sanitizer anytime one of it was like a three-legged dog also, but anytime one of the dogs came by her, she wanted hand sanitizer. And Tim Conway was improvising and she kept interrupting, saying, so like, are we going to do the scene how it's written now? And it said uh Naya Rivera says, come on, if Tim Conway wants to improvise, you let him improvise. He'd even brought his granddaughter to the set because she was such a Glee fan and ended up crying because she couldn't understand why somebody was being such a bitch to her grandpa. Finally, my co-star gave up, locked herself in the trailer, and refused to come out.
Hey. Okay, so I had to look up who Tim Conway was. But yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff that we saw as kids.
Yeah,
So he was like an established veteran actor when he was on Glee. And you would think that Leah Michelle would have some respect.
which I think that kind of ties into the rumor that she can't read because I heard that she doesn't like improvising because she memorizes her lines because she can't read them. Which I'm not saying that's true. I just think it's funny to link those two.
I do
And
think that's a very funny conspiracy theory, and I've seen some funny facts like that kind of make me think maybe it's true. But you'd think in that case she would like improvising, unless she's not really talented or not really funny, and she needs lines to do her job.
yeah, and she is talented, but also I think that especially young people when they're told that they're great all the time and that they're amazing, they start to get a big head and they start treating people poorly. And I think for a long time, people really praised her and doted on her.
Mm-hmm.
And so she became the person that we hear about. And I mean, we talked about this before, if you don't want people to say bad things about you, maybe you should think about how you treat people before
Mm-hmm.
you do it, or then people wouldn't have because this is the next thing that she says. She doesn't say a lot about Leah Michelle, but she said, so she basically goes on to say that what scene that they were shooting in a diner, and um, one of the producers was, she was like, come on, let's go. Like, are we doing this? You're on my mark. And he was like, I've been running this show for 6 years. And then she says, without raising my voice, I responded, yes, poorly. And
Naya
it,
said that?
yes, to the producer. And so it goes on to say that there were leaks in the tabloids that she was getting fired from Glee because it was at the very end of the season. And so she gets together with the producer for a dinner and apologizes. And um, she said she understands that you're not supposed to tell your boss that they're doing a horrible job, but she didn't think that it warranted a smear campaign. Um, and then she says he insisted they had nothing to do with the rumors, and reading between the lines, it sounded like there was a giant blinking arrow pointing to a certain someone. So I guess you can throw a bitch fit, lock yourself in your trailer, and stall production, yet still allegedly find the time to leak stories to the press. I nodded. Well, I thought that person doesn't write my lines or my checks, so I don't give a flying fuck, and we're moving on.
Wow. That's sad.
Yeah,
Because when you said, like, when people are told how talented they are, they can turn into, someone with a big head. But I feel like that only happens to you if you already have that inside of you.
yeah, it does. Because I
Because when
feel,
we talk about Beyond the Wand with Tom Felton,
yeah,
look how many people told him he was great, and he
uh,
doesn't seem like a
no,
big-headed jerk.
he doesn't. And then the last thing that she really said was, when I announced that I was writing a book, everyone expected me to use it to rip Leah a new one. So let me list a few of the reasons why I'm not going to do that. One, I have better things to write about. Two, it doesn't bring you up to bring someone else down. And three, I don't hate Leah and I never have. And she does talk about good times that they had together before the show really took off, like about them going shopping
Mm-hmm.
and spending time together. And so I think that she does say that she doesn't think that Leah liked sharing the spotlight, very similar to her character, that
Yeah,
she did not like when other cast members got as big as they did and got more lines and got more songs, because I think that she thought that she was the star.
wow.
Yeah.
That does sound really interesting. I'm gonna have to read that. So, what do you feel like was the overall message of her book?
Well, I will take a quote from what she said. It says, your life doesn't have to be perfect for you to be proud. In fact, I think it's the opposite. It's more, the more imperfect your life has been, the prouder you should be, because it means that you've come that much further and also probably had a lot more fun along the way.
That's so sweet.
And I think that just, it really sums up life, at least the life I've lived. And I think you can agree with the life you've lived that it's been hard at some points and we've been down and out, but we've come so far from being down and out. And sometimes we might still be down and out, but I don't think it'll ever be as low as some of our lowest points.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I admire her like authenticness
Yes,
and
it
her
was
honesty.
very good and very honest. And she talks about having an eating disorder because it wasn't because anybody ever told her that she was heavy or looked bad. It was because of something that she could control, was her eating, when she couldn't control
Mm-hmm.
anything else. And I feel like that is so important because there are a lot of people that have eating disorders because they are told that they're unattractive or they don't have the ideal body. But sometimes when you're a kid and things are crazy around you, that's what you can control. And so you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a really good book. Like I said, I reread it for this podcast. I actually read it all today at work.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. So it's
yes.
fresh.
Yes, it is. And um I really enjoyed it the second time. But like I said, it's been quite a few years since I read it the first time, and you should read it.
I think I will.
Yes. And so I was going to ask you, you read Yearbook by Seth Rogen. Where
Mm-hmm.
does he start with his memoir? Does he start from his childhood, from acting perspective? What is it about?
So yeah, I did read Yearbook by Seth Rogen. I love Seth Rogen. I probably have seen every movie he's ever been in. Maybe not a couple, like I wasn't too into Sausage Party. But I read his memoir a couple years ago and it made me like him so much more because there was just a lot I didn't know about him. And he does start off with the beginning of his life, but this book is a series of short stories. So it's not all chronological. He does bounce back and forth, but he talks about how he was born and raised in Vancouver, British Columbia. He has an older sister. His mom was a social worker, and his dad, he describes his dad as working to make money. It was his work was never where he found like his life's purpose from. His dad was just, a hard worker, but that his their real passions were they were like standing up for what's right. They protested a lot. They were very much into activism and stuff like that. But an interesting story about his parents, his dad has OCD and Tourette's syndrome, and Seth says he has mild Tourette's syndrome too. It's not verbal tics like a lot of people imagine Tourette's being. He has more of just physical ones, um, like having to clear his throat or having to scratch or touch his ears or nose, things like that. But his dad has OCD. So growing up, his dad would get really upset because he would always have to wear white champion socks. They had to be champion. And he would get really upset if one felt more worn out than the other. Like, you know how you wash all your socks together and you pair them up, how you pair them up. Sure, you try to see which ones look older and pair those with those ones. But he said his dad could feel the difference. So he would number every sock for 1 1, 2 2, 3 3, etc. So they were all paired up. And he said there were many times he had friends over and his dad was yelling, "Have you seen a 7 or a 9? I can't find them anywhere." And it was such a joke in their family and among their friends that there was a Canadian show called Chore Wars that a lot of his parents' friends were saying, "You need to be on this," because it was a show about people who had weird house rituals with their cleaning or just had trouble dividing up who's going to do what in families. And he said their house was always really disorganized. Like it wasn't messy, it wasn't gross, but there would be piles of crap everywhere all his whole life. So his parents got on this show, and Seth Rogen said it was so popular that they would be in the grocery store and people would just come up to his dad and be like, "You're the sock guy. We had to watch that in my sociology class." They were mini celebrities because of
Uh,
that.
uh,
But it seems like he always had a good sense of humor, and he said as soon as he found out that people could make a living off of being funny, that's what he wanted to do. And he started doing stand up at 12 years old.
wow.
I can't imagine having the guts to get up on a stage. He said he started um he told his parents he wanted to be a comedian, and he was very surprised that his Jewish parents supported him and didn't tell him he was crazy. So they signed him up for an improv slash stand up class where they told you this is how you write a joke, this is what you should write about. And his teacher said, nobody wants to hear about the things you think are cool or funny. What makes something funny is the pain, like the struggle. So think about the things you hate and make a joke out of that. And he said it really just shaped his comedy. And he started by his class would have to go to this lesbian bar and do their jokes to practice. And he said he wasn't that good at first, but he just kept doing it and was gaining popularity. And even as a teenager, they kept inviting him back or wanting him to go to other clubs. And he even, there was I'm probably mispronouncing this, Amoy, like Amoyer, the rabbi who does circumcisions. So
Um,
this really popular Moyer in the area paid him like $50 per joke to write jokes that this rabbi would tell as he's circumcising babies.
oh
So he had
my,
a really weird beginning of childhood.
oh my gosh.
I know.
That's funny though.
I
I love
know.
that. Oh,
Good for him. And he said he would buy weed and stuff like that, share it with his friends. And it was really cool because he was saying when he was turning 13, so much of the Jewish community around him was also turning 13. So they called it
yeah.
bar mitzvah slash bar mitzvah season. So they were going to lots of bar mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs that year. And he said that's where he met his best friends, Evan Goldberg and Fogel. And yes, the three of them started writing Superbad together when they were freshmen or eighth graders. I can't remember which. They were 13 years old when they started writing Superbad. And they spent and it was about them. And looking back, I'm like, duh, of course it was, because it is about Seth and Evan and Fogel in the
It
movie.
is. That's so funny. And Seth Rogen's in that as the cop.
Yes, he is.
Oh, I think that's the first Seth Rogen movie I ever remember watching.
Same.
But I did love Freaks and Geeks, even though it was only on for one season.
Okay, so you did watch Freaks and Geeks because he talks about
Yes.
that, how he got, I don't know how, he doesn't explain too much how he got that part. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was just luck, but he started that when he was 16 and moved to California.
Wow. Well, I did look it up that uh Judd Apatow created that show, and he's the one that has created a lot of movies that Seth Rogen has been in.
Interesting.
But I also don't know how he got the part. But oh, that's such a good movie. I wish it would have been longer because that was with James Franco. Who else
Oh,
was
is
in
that
that
how they
show?
met? I've never seen Freaks and Geeks. What is it about?
It's about a teenager. It's about high schoolers basically, and this girl, I think she's a senior and her brother is a freshman, and her friend group is the Freaks. They're kind of like alternative kids in the I think in the early 90s because it did. Yeah, it was in 1999 I think the show came on. So I think it was set in the early maybe it was set before then. Let me see. Oh, so it was set in the 80s. It was set in 1980. Um, so the sister, her friend group are the Freaks because they're alternative kids. They smoke weed, they listen to rock music, and her little brother is a freshman, and his friends are the geeks. Him and his friends are the geeks. And
Okay. I know
it's,
it has like a cult following, even though it wasn't on very long.
yes, it was just one season, and it has Jason Segel.
Mm-hmm.
He's really funny. Uh, Linda Cardinelli, I think her name is. She's really pretty. She's in other stuff too. But yeah, it's such a funny show.
That is
You should watch it. I
awesome.
don't think I watched it until like probably 2008-ish. So I watched it like 10 years after it came out. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should check it out. So yeah, he was on that and that fizzled out. So he and Evan, because they became best friends after that, and it was just really sweet how he said like they were all at this bar mitzvah one day and just shooting the shit together. And from that moment on, they were friends, and how he said it was like the first time he realized he wasn't alone anymore. Like life might get crazy, but he had his person now, and he and Evan Goldberg are still friends. They've written so many movies together: Superbad, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, The Interview. I love all those movies. And but
I
he's not in them. It's really interesting how Evan is like Seth Rogen's right hand man, but Seth will be in the movies and Evan isn't, which is interesting. But they're a good dream team, and they were really worried when American Pie came out because they thought it was going to be so much like Superbad that they had missed their chance. And that was in 1999, and Superbad didn't come out until 2007. So obviously that's a big gap from when they finished writing it to when they actually got to make it, but that was huge.
That is so huge. Those are some really good movies. I really love Pineapple Express. I love
Mm-hmm.
Danny McBride. He's so funny, and he's also in This Is the End. Does he talk
Yes.
about how he met some of his famous friends like James Franco or
No, not too much, honestly. He focuses a lot on his himself and stuff that have happened to him. Like he brings up a lot of different celebrities in the stories, but only like his interactions with them. And some of the stories in this book happened before he was even famous. Like one that I thought was really funny. He when he was 10 years old, he went to this Jewish summer camp and met this guy named Ben, and they became really good friends and pen pals because they lived in different states or different parts of Canada. But they kept in touch all those years. So when he was 18, Freaks and Geeks was over, and they were like, let's go on a trip. Let's go to Amsterdam. And it was just a crazy story because he said he didn't have a cell phone that could be used internationally because they really didn't exist back then. And if they did, they were super expensive. So they were both coming from different parts of the country to Amsterdam and just said, we're going to meet at this time in this spot. And his parents were so scared. They let him go, but they said, you have to get a money belt. And he said it was, just this flat thing that you kind of tuck into your waistband and then it would curve around your love handles. But he told them he would wear it. So he did. And they stayed in a hostel. And one of the first things they wanted to do was get high because, there's so much weed there, go to the Van Gogh Museum, which they did and said it was pretty cool, and then go to a live sex show. So they go to this live sex show, and he says the intro was just a lot of people stripping really slowly, looking like they didn't want to be there, and he was bored. So he kept begging his friend, "Come on, let's go out and smoke a little bit, and then we'll come back in. We're not gonna miss anything." And Ben kept saying, "Well, I don't want to miss the sex show. It's about to start any minute." But Seth convinced him. They went, they smoked, they came back, and two people were using towels to mop up the floor. So they had missed the sex part. But the grand finale was going to happen. So his friend was really pissed that they had missed the sex. And this woman comes out in lingerie and asks for a volunteer. So Ben is like, "You have to volunteer." And Seth says no because he's terrified he's going to have to fuck this lady on stage in front of everybody. Because he said it was a theater, like seats full of people.
oh my
And
gosh.
Ben's like, "No, you have to do it. It's your fault we missed the sex part and blah, blah, blah." So convinces Seth to go up. He's the only one that raises his hand because she was like begging for a volunteer and nobody was taking the bait. So he goes up there. Oh my gosh. I might just need to find this part real quick and
Okay.
just read how he describes it. She says, "Please take off your shirt." Okay, not a great start, but who knows? Maybe we were going to wrestle or something. I took off my shirt and, to my dismay, was met with waves of laughter from the crowd. Uproarious laughter, clapping, knee slapping. I mean, I'm no Timothy Chalamet, but I didn't think my body was worth laughing at hysterically. I looked down at myself, and there it was, the fucking money belt. It was protruding above my waistband for all to see, and more specifically, laugh super duper hard at. Not only was that humiliating, it was a massive security breach. Now, everyone in this place knew exactly where to look if they were going to try to rob me. So here I am on stage, money belt situated, maybe three-quarters of the way into my belly button. What next? Please lay on the floor, face up. Oy vey. Now, I'm no germaphobe, and I did not see specifically what happened on this stage, but I could imagine the culmination wasn't the type of thing that one would want to lie down in. Sure, I saw the tail end of the cleanup, but they weren't really putting much elbow grease into it. It was uninspired, like a waiter in a diner quickly wiping down a table. Also, not for nothing, but me lying down on my back was a position sex might happen in, playing into my first fear, the fear of fucking on a stage in front of strangers and one friend. I looked at Ben sitting down in the audience. He gestured, "Get down there." I did, and as my bare back pressed against the floor, it felt clammy and wooden like a giant popsicle stick that someone been sucking. The lovely woman then produced a Sharpie, took off the cap, and inserted the back end of it in her vagina. She then squatted over me and proceeded to write on my torso, the pen firmly gripped by her cervix. I think. I don't know all the vagina parts by name. None of us could tell what she was writing, but we were all rapt with anticipation. She finished, stood me up, and we all got to see the prestige. In perfect cursive, it said triumphantly, "The end." This shit blew that my left foot shit out of the water. Daniel Day-Lewis can suck this lady's fucking dick. That dude might be the coolest actor on earth, but he ain't writing shit on people's bodies with his vagina. Even if we gave him a pass and let him put the Sharpie in his bumhole, it would never have this level of penmanship. It was true art, and I was honored to be a part of it. It was one of the best rounds of applause I've ever had, and most important, Ben seemed happy.
Oh,
What a
that's
memory. And he
so
goes on
funny.
about how like they got shrooms the next day, and when they did shrooms, at home, they were always dehydrated and they would have 3 or 4 little dehydrated mushrooms. But this store that they went to in Amsterdam, they were fresh, like fresh grown in these terrariums. So they got 3 packs thinking they would have 3 each, not realizing that fresh shrooms were so potent that they were tripping balls, and his friend got so paranoid that they left their hostel early and got on a train to Paris and didn't know where the hell they were.
Oh gosh, that's my worst nightmare. Oh, I've never done shrooms, but I have done a hallucinogen and it made me paranoid too. And being in another country, oh my God, I can't imagine.
I know. And they
Oh.
said they asked the guy selling them, how many do people normally do? And he was like, it depends. Like, no
Oh,
help there.
I feel like that's always like if you like go into a weed store, they're usually just like, they like don't really tell you like what a good dose is because and honestly, they don't know how much you've done or what you do. So, oh, that's scary.
Yes. I mean, what a good story to tell now, but yeah, it must have
And then
been
just
terrible in the moment.
getting on a, I would be so scared to get on a train to another country while I was tripping balls.
Right?
Like, I feel like I would be like arrested and thrown in some like some prison
Foreign,
in another country and like,
right? Well, now I want to see if I can write my name with a Sharpie in my vagina. Like, that
and
is
how,
talent,
yeah, and how, and if it'll look nice.
right?
Oh,
So that was one really funny story from his book that stuck with me. Another one was he was describing how he really developed a love of rap music from a young age and how he's been blessed to come in contact with a lot of famous rappers in his life. And he went into that a little bit. I guess there was one Grammys where Eminem was doing a song with Rihanna and Dr. Dre and specifically wanted Seth Rogen to present. So he goes to the Grammys and he said it was totally different than like the Oscars because at the Oscars there's not green rooms. There's usually just like a big backstage with like an open bar and lots of snacks and stuff like that. But he said here all of the artists had like their own green room and he couldn't find anywhere to get a drink. So he said there was a bunch of people in Bob Dylan's green room and there was a lot of drinks being served. So he was able to snag a beer from there. But he didn't see Bob Dylan, which he was really disappointed about because he loves him. And this bodyguard comes up to him while he's drinking his beer and says, "Hey, M wants to talk to you." And Seth's like, "Oh, great." Like, he hasn't met him yet, so he's excited. And the bodyguard's like, "Nah, nah, you can't bring that," meaning his beer. He says M is sober. And Seth is like, "Okay, well, I'm not going to pour it down his throat." And the bodyguard was like, "He can't even be around it. You got to put that down." So he did. And he said he went and said hi. And it was really awkward, but he had never met someone whose sobriety was like that important or that sensitive that they couldn't even be around it. So he was very nice about it, but he just said, he had never experienced that before. So after he said hi to Eminem, his beer had been thrown away, so he was able to get a screwdriver, which he said was disgusting. And then I saw her, Beyonce, arm in arm with Gwyneth Paltrow. I don't usually go say hi to other famous people. I generally try to avoid it at all costs, but this was Beyonce, or as my father in law calls her, Beyonce. I had to try to say hi. In retrospect, I approached with too much confidence. I didn't have nearly the reverence I should have. I should have gone up to her like you would the queen, or that giant bird creature in Harry Potter that you have to bow to before you can fly around on it. I marched up. "Hey, Beyonce, I'm Seth," and a giant arm swung out like a baseball bat and smacked me across the chest so fucking hard, I stumbled back and spilled my screwdriver all over myself. I was soaked. Her security had wisely batted me away before I could get close. At that exact moment, a PA came up to me and said, "All right, Seth, they're ready for you." So he includes a picture of him at the Grammys where he was trying to hold his hands over his spill because it was all over his suit because he got cock blocked from Beyonce's bodyguard.
Oh my,
I
I
just
feel
love
like
that a huge star like him was starstruck at Beyonce and that he made a Harry Potter reference.
I love that. I do think it's weird that a famous person would have a bodyguard backstage where everyone's famous.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of what he was getting at, that it was weird, but she's the queen of the celebrities. Like, she's too good for the celebrities.
That is so funny. Oh, that is crazy. I can't, maybe because I'm not even close to anywhere famous, but the thought of like meeting Eminem, like M wants to talk
Yes.
to you, like he was like, I just feel like he would just be like really chill about it, like, yeah, man. And I would be like, oh my God, Eminem, Eminem, Eminem. Oh,
Yes. And the
but I,
fact that Eminem specifically wanted him there, that was so cool to be requested by
yes,
Mathers himself.
and, but I think that's what makes Seth Rogen so funny and just so good is that he has that confidence that like
True.
he can just walk up to Beyonce.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, realistically, I don't think it's necessary to have a bodyguard backstage at the Grammys
Mm-mm.
when everyone at the I don't think you can buy tickets to the Grammys like you can the Kids' Choice Awards, you know? Like, I think all the people at the Grammys are supposed to be at the Grammys.
Very good point.
Oh, that's
Yeah. So
so
very
funny.
cool. And I had to tell you this one because he said he also met Snoop Dogg a couple times. Um, so he says, "I got to meet Snoop Dogg a couple of times, the first of which was amazing and eye-opening. We have a moment, and this is the end, where Craig Robinson is serenading a party of people with his staple classic, 'Take Your Panties Off.' We thought it would be funny if we had an actual version of the song at the end of the movie, so we asked Snoop Dogg if he would collaborate with Craig, and he said yes. I arrived at the studio, and soon after, Snoop comes in with like 4 or 5 people, one of whom is a blunt roller, as in someone whose only job is to roll blunts. I want that job.
Me too. Even though I don't know how to roll a blunt,
I would
because
learn for Snoop.
me too, and they would be the best. I would practice like it was my full-time job because it would be, but I would do it every day. I would just not even smoke them. I would just roll them and unroll them, roll them and unroll them until it got so good that I could impress Snoop Dogg.
Right? That's so cool. So he says that Snoop came in and they were talking, and Snoop had wrote a hook with Craig. Um, and Seth wanted him to write a verse to go with it. So he says, Snoop said, "You want me to rap?" And Seth was like, "Yeah, man." And Snoop says, "Shit, I thought I was just doing the hook." And Seth said, "It would be awesome if you could do a verse too." He put his head down and thought for a long moment. Then he looked over to one of his guys, narrowed his gaze, and said, "Bring in the hose." The guy left, and within 30 seconds, he returned with 5 or 6 women who were very much dressed like strippers at the start of a routine. The producer blasted the beat, and the women danced and drank while Snoop wrote a rap verse on his Blackberry. After about 20 minutes, he was finished writing and gestured to his guy, who escorted the hose out, vanishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. This obviously raised a lot of questions. One, where were the hose up till that point? We were not in a big building, and I hadn't seen them before that moment. Two, why were the hose there? This was probably the easiest to figure out. It seemed to be for inspiration. Everyone has their writing process, I guess. I like to drink coffee and sparkling water while I write. Snoop likes to have a team of hoes magically appear and dance around while he writes. 3. Were they there just in case? He didn't think he was going to be writing any raps, so he, in theory, wouldn't need the hoses' presence. Yet the hoes were present. That seems like a complicated and expensive contingency plan to have in place at all times. A bunch of hoes following you around on the off chance you ask to write a rap verse? Who are they? Oh, just my bus full of Muse hoes in case a song making opportunity arises. 4. Why have I been saying hoes this whole time? I definitely shouldn't do that.
That's so. I've never heard that about Snoop Dogg. That's hilarious.
Either.
I love that so much. I
But
would
he,
love to witness that. Seth
right?
Rogen and Snoop Dogg and Chris Robinson and just have the host come in.
What a life. I love that story.
Ah,
So funny. I wouldn't, he doesn't mention if he got high with Snoop Dogg though. And I'm like, how can you be in Snoop's presence and not share a blunt?
I'm sure it goes without saying,
I
maybe.
hope so.
Because
Because,
I love to watch the videos that Seth Rogen used to post on his Instagram where he was making glassware or smokeware.
yes,
And I want one. They're so cool.
I know. I do too. Um, yeah, Seth Rogen is very into weed. He has his own weed business now, where not only does he make strains, but he also makes fancy ashtrays and vases and all this stuff to go with it. He actually designed this really cool ashtray because I think he smokes a lot of blunts, which I'm not into, but it's like on a stand. It looks really retro and just classy. I just love how his style has developed, and I love seeing the vases he makes. And it's kind of funny because in this chapter where he's talking about the Grammys, he mentions how a couple years later, someone who looked like him came up to him and said that his friend was at the Grammys that night he presented too, and someone came up to him, gave him a harmonica, and said, Bob Dylan is a big fan of yours because they thought this guy was Seth Rogen. So he says, the only reason I'm putting this in here is because if that's you, I want that harmonica. You've had it long enough. It's my turn. I will make you 4 vases.
That's so funny. Oh, that's epic.
It is.
Those are such cool stories. I actually got onto Apple Books and I have it for want to read. I'm gonna get it for after I finish the book I'm listening to. I'm gonna get it to listen to because I want to hear him read these stories because it's so funny how you read it because I can also hear him saying it like you were saying.
Right? He totally puts like his intonation and his voice into it. So yeah, I think the audiobook would be hilarious. There was one more story I had to share because I know you would appreciate it. Um, he says of all his celebrity like encounters and relationships, My relationship with Kanye West is probably the longest and weirdest. So he says how in 2004 he was living in this certain place of LA, and had just moved in, and he was outside, and this black guy, Kanye lookalike, runs by him and says, "You're really funny, man," and just kept running. And he was like, "That looks like Kanye West." Well, it turns out it was, and that Seth lived next to a really famous celebrity personal trainer. So Kanye was there like every week. And he talks about, they would like pass each other and talk now and then. And one day he gets a knock on the door after Seth was partying all night and felt really hungover. And it was Kanye West standing at his front door saying, "Do you want to come out and play basketball?" And Seth said, "I'm way too hungover. I'll probably throw up all over the place." And Kanye just hung his head and walked off sadly. And how Seth felt so bad because he was a really big Kanye fan, but he just felt like shit. And he knew he
I've
couldn't,
been there.
right? Um, but he said they would keep running into each other year after year. And one day, him, Seth, and his wife were they were in New York because his wife was filming something on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show. So they had just gotten some snacks to take it back to their hotel, and they run into the lobby Kanye West. So they were nervous at first because I think this was after Seth Rogen and James Franco filmed the parody of Kanye's music video. Do you remember that?
Yes.
The one on the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
Seth was really kind of embarrassed because he didn't know how Kanye would take it. But he said Kanye took it like a champ and said, "No, it's fine. I loved it. You were the only ones who actually got how stupid and bad our video was supposed to be." Which, do you buy that?
no. I think Kanye takes himself very seriously.
Right?
But it's nice that he can play it off and not get
Yes.
offended.
So they kind of made up, and all of a sudden Kanye's like, "Yeah, I've been working on some new music. Do you want to hear it?" And Seth and his wife are like, Sure, we'd love to." So Kanye says, "Come out to my van." And they're like, "Your van?" And he says, "Yeah, I got a big van." So it was like this Mercedes van that Kanye had decked out the back of to be like a mobile office, which is kind of cool when I think
Yeah.
about it. So people would drive him around to appearances and stuff, and he could still work. So Seth describes it like it's as nice inside like a first class cabin of a commercial airplane, but it had way more LED lighting. So he says Kanye sits down and pulls out this laptop, plugs it in, and brings up an iTunes playlist of about 20 songs. So Kanye's like, "All right, I only have the beats, and some of them don't have any hooks, so I'll just fill in everything else, okay?" So Seth, this is how Seth describes it. He hits play, and the beat kicks in loud. Kanye. "All right." I start rapping here, and I'm like, bit, bit a bop, and a boom, bit a bap. And everyone goes, "Thank you, you." And then I come back again, rapping like, boom, wop, bam, pop, wop, bam. And then I say, "Thank you, you." And then Frank Ocean will come in here and be like, "Baba boo." And he said it went on like this for 2.5 hours. Kanye played them every song he was working on. And Seth said he was kind of high and paranoid and just sitting there like, "How much do I bob my head? What if I'm bobbing my head too much? What if I'm not doing it enough? Do I look at him? Do I stare off into space?" But he said they finished, and it was kind of an awkward goodbye, and they couldn't really leave. Like he wouldn't let them leave. And then after the music, he pulls out this drawing of a voluptuous tiger cat lady. And Seth describes it if Kim Kardashian was cast in Cats. And Kanye said it was this movie he's working on. And for the next 40 minutes, he took them through the whole storyboard for this entire movie about these sexy cat creatures. And Kanye said they find this tree and it's like sexy and there's fruit on the tree. You get that? You get the analogy? like the Bible, but with these sexy cats. And they're all going to be like really sexy. And so he said it was just one of the weirdest interactions he's ever had. And the next year, Kanye's new album came out, and not one of those songs he played for them was on it.
Oh, oh,
What
that's
a
like,
life.
oh, I've definitely been like that high where you start overthinking things. You're like, I need to do
Hmm.
this, but I can't do this. People will think this, and you just get stuck in your head. And then to also have to not offend Kanye West,
Right?
like you have to seem interested, and then that he like won't let you leave. That's also kind of scary that you're just in the back of his van and he won't let you leave.
I know. And then all they wanted to do was go back to their hotel and eat their dessert because it'd been a long day. And they get this like private concert, but it's like songs that aren't even done. And then I come in with the boom bop bap.
Yes, oh my God.
You.
I honestly think that I would love to hear that if he released it though.
Yes, me
But
too.
it makes me feel the tiniest ounce of sadness for Kanye because I'm like, I think he's like, he sounds lonely. That like he would just come
Hmm.
knock on somebody's door and ask them to play basketball and be disappointed and
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, there's still that little boy inside of him who just wanted to be accepted, you know?
yeah,
And this book, when was it written? Let's see.
2021.
Oh, really? Okay, so it came out in
Yeah.
2021. So I guess Kanye had already been having some issues. And Seth, um, I feel like he handled it really gracefully. And he said he doesn't have like any real deep insight into Kanye or his current state of being or mindset, but he really loves Kanye's music, and all of his interactions with him had been lovely. And he just said, a lot of times when people say incredibly shitty stuff, we we have this phenomenon where we can see how our own actions are like based on love or good intentions, but when it's actions of people we disagree with, we seem to think it's based on hate. And he said, I don't think Kanye is hateful. I think he's grasping and struggling to make his way through life. um and I thought that was really nice.
That's a really nice way of putting things because you're right. W- We sometimes, everybody, I think, at some point has tried to justify their own shitty behaviors or the shitty things that they have said because they were in this place in their life or they felt this way. And we don't personally know Kanye. I will never agree
Hmm.
with the things that he says, but I do think that it's nice that somebody, he was able to make fun of Kanye kind of, with the bibbidi beep bop boo and not being able to leave, but also touching on a very serious subject that Kanye has been out there talking kind of crazy, but that he can't speak on that because that's not his experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was really sweet how he handled the Kanye situation and kind of showed a lighter side to Kanye too, like the story about him wanting to play basketball. It's just so endearing and so normal.
It is, and I think I'm not blaming anybody he's ever been with, but I think being a part of a family as famous as the Kardashian Jenners, there's so much pressure and spotlight on you from the outside world and maybe even internally that you just kind of crack when so much pressure and is focused at you.
I never thought about that, but now that you mention it, when I've seen Kanye on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which he wasn't on it for a long time because he wasn't comfortable with that. He looked so uncomfortable, and like he was a lot more quiet and more subdued, which is not how we normally see him.
Yeah, and of course they are gonna the family is going to be comfortable doing it because they've been doing it so long, but to be kind of forced into that situation because you're with that the person you love is doing that and it's about their life and you're part of their life, so it's kind of forced on you. And I think it's just a lot of pressure and I don't know the inner workings of their family, so I definitely don't judge them or blame them for anything that Kanye has done that's crazy because at the end of the day, we have to all take accountability for our own actions. But also, I think it is very hard to be under such a spotlight when the Kardashian Jenners have been referred to as like the royal family of the United States almost.
That's so true. And even though Kanye was already very famous when he got with Kim, it's not for reality show, right? It's
Yeah.
different when you're on the stage at a concert or acting or something where there's that separation of your personal life. Like you go home and there aren't cameras, but
Yeah.
the Kardashians go home and there's cameras everywhere. And I also wonder if maybe his feelings of it changed once they had kids and their kids were a part of that.
I have heard things that he does not agree with their kids being in the spotlight and being followed. And those are very valid feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think those are things that you need to talk about, especially when your partner is very famous, like Kim Kardashian, before you have children. Like what your expectations are, as a family.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very true. Gosh, and I know I'm so torn on it because there is so much Kanye has said or done that I totally disagree with, but I still don't dislike him. If I'm being honest, I'm so fascinated by him. I think he is a true artist in the way I think of art. Um, and he's like very experimental and he is outrageous and I don't know. I just can't write him off yet. Like, I want to see his comeback.
That would be really cool to see his comeback. And I really, really enjoyed a lot of Kanye albums,
Mm-hmm.
especially Graduation and The College Dropout. I didn't realize The College Dropout came out in 2004.
Dang.
Yeah. And Graduation was my jam in 2007. Oh, I bought that
Wow.
CD. Yeah.
Well, 2004 is when Seth said he first met Kanye. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And he's had a lot more albums than I thought he had. He's had a lot. I'm looking at them now, and there's a
Yeah, I feel
lot.
like not all of them have gotten as much playtime in like main media.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. Did you see that he is married again in quotations that they had a ceremony but they did not file for a marriage license?
No.
Yeah,
To
like
whom?
recently. Can't remember her name. I think a model, Bianca Sensori. But it says 2 months after his divorce was finalized.
She looks so much like a younger Kim. That's creepy.
Yeah, but technically they had a private ceremony, but technically they're not legally married because they don't have a marriage license.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I think that's crazy too.
Yeah.
Fascinating though, because I
Yeah. I
keep
think he's
reading
struggling.
about it. Yeah, but it's kind of like our fascination with Nick Cannon is it's you can't look away. Like
It's
you
so
want to
true.
see what's going to happen next. Like you want to be in the know of what's going to happen next, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
valid for somebody that's been as famous as Kanye for as long as he's been famous.
Right. Well, and Kanye, he's very performative. He likes attention, and this could just be another way to get it. It reminds me of in Yearbook, Seth also mentioned how when Kim and Kanye were going, I don't know if it was their actual wedding or just their reception in France. Kanye really wanted Seth Rogen and James Franco to go and like ride down the aisle on a motorcycle. But and Seth said he totally would have done it, but he had like a prior commitment for work.
Oh,
That would have been legendary though. So I like how Kanye can make fun of himself.
yes. I think that's important because it shows that he's not as out of touch as some of his comments make him seem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And,
Yeah, so
but
Yearbook
he's
was
done.
really good. I do recommend it if you want a good laugh. And a lot of his stories were just so fascinating. Did you ever see the interview
That interview.
with
Which one?
it's the
I've
movie
seen
with
parts of it about South Korea, North Korea.
yes. So
Yes.
James Franco in it plays this really famous Hollywood kind of like a gossip news artist. Like one of the first scenes, it's obviously fake, but James Franco's character is interviewing Eminem, and Eminem comes out as gay on live on air on this show. And Eminem, it's actually Eminem acting in it too, which I loved because it just shows that he has a sense of humor too. And he's like, yeah, I don't understand how people haven't connected the dots before with all my gay lyrics. So he's this really famous interviewer, and Kim in the movie, Kim Jong-un is a big fan, and he agrees to do an interview with James Franco's character. I can't remember his name in it. And Seth Rogen plays the producer for this television show. So the US FBI or CIA, I can't remember which one, finds out that Kim Jong Un agreed to do this interview. And so they go to Seth and James and are like, this is our chance. You're going to kill him. And so they're teaching Seth and James like these different poisons they can use and are teaching them how to like be discreet about it. And basically, they want James Franco's character to shake Kim Jong Un's hand. And it's this certain kind of poison that's, supposed to be delayed so they can get out of the country before he dies. As you can imagine, it's a comedy, so plan goes to hell and all this funny stuff happens. But when the movie was coming out, North Korea was really pissed, and Seth Rogen and James Franco were getting death threats. Um, the production company's computers were being hacked. There was all this stuff, and Seth talks about how like terrible it felt and how he was getting all of this pressure to edit the movie or not have it come out at all and how he really had to fight for it to come out, and now he feels like crap because he feels like it could have been bigger, and now he like turns on the TV and it's one of those movies that's like always playing on TBS or things like that, and how he kind of feels ashamed about it. And I've never wanted to write a celebrity a fan letter, at least not since elementary school, like Justin Timberlake or something. But after I read this book, I wanted to write a letter to Seth Rogen because I think that movie is so good. And I think he's looking at it wrong. Like it's on TV all the time because it's so funny. And it was kind of historical in the fact that this whole country and this dictator knew about him and his movie and
I
was
do,
pissed.
yeah, I do remember the controversy around the time it came out, and was it gonna
Mm-hmm.
come out, wasn't it? I should watch it. I think my husband has, and I normally don't pay attention half the time. But I love the Pineapple Express so much. I love his movies. I don't like Knocked Up that much, but it's just because I feel like there's a lot of movies that are very similar to that.
Yeah,
But it's not because of anybody's acting. It's just not my favorite movie. But the movies he's in they're so good. And I do believe he has distanced himself from James Franco,
yeah,
but I do think that they are very funny together.
I do too. It makes me really sad. He barely mentions James Franco in the book, and I assume it's because it is so complicated and sad. Like, I don't know. I haven't been in that position where one of my best friends was accused of terrible things. So I don't know how it feels or what I would do.
And also, there's the part of self-preservation where you have to think about your livelihood of for your, he has a wife, he has a family,
Hmm.
his self, his family, his career. So I think that you can, I would like to think that they're still friends on the level, but it's just private
I hope
and
so.
it's not talked about. That's what my hope is.
And I
I
do
don't think,
think people can get help and change, and I hope that James Franco is getting that.
yeah, and the controversy with James Franco, I think, is mostly about the abuse of power that he was in because he was a teacher at a college and, you know, having inappropriate relations with women that were his students.
Hmm.
And that's definitely wrong, the abuse of power.
Hmm. I
But
know
at least
it
it wasn't like
is.
children. I I don't want to like say at least it's not because it's still terrible. I just feel like it could be worse.
Were they, was it college students?
Yeah.
See, I had an English professor I will never forget. His first name was Todd. He was like 6'3", dark hair, tan, so handsome. And he would recite Shakespearean poetry to us. And I would just sit there and drool. And I would have fucked the shit out of him. And I know it's ethically wrong. Like, I know you can get fired for that. And I understand why, because it is an ethical boundary and you're in a position of power. But I'm also like, yeah, but I was a grown adult and I would have been willing.
But I do also think that there is the extra level added that James Franco was famous
Yeah,
and that, maybe he said that he could get them parts in movies or I don't know all the
yeah.
details. So
Mm-hmm.
part of me thinks that, yes, you know, grown people can consent, but also just kind of like with the Try Guys and Ned Fulmer, that person in power needs to realize the power that they have and
True.
what they are doing too.
Yeah,
Because
you're absolutely right. Because I'm not one of his victims and I didn't feel that way and I wasn't there to see how it felt to be pressured or, like you said, maybe lied to or promised certain things. So you're so right.
so I know I want to be like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it is, and I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to minimalize the victim's feelings of how they feel. I just think that everybody, if they make a mistake, I don't think that their lives should be completely ruined. And losing friends it can be equivalent to ruining your life,
Yeah.
like, because I know it's a big part of my life, but also I don't, I don't think I could do personally something so heinous that would cross a boundary with you, because I've made mistakes that I've had to come clean about, but also I don't think that anything crossed such an ethical boundary in our friendship that it was hard to continue to be my friend.
Yeah, like it wasn't as personal.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I can separate You can separate a lot of things when it
yeah.
comes to the people you love.
So, and yeah, just like with Ned Fulmer, like he did what he did, and he shouldn't have the status that he had, but also he lost his friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's still with his wife but it just sucks that but also when you're that famous, like what's on the line. So I
Right.
don't know. It's a gray area, I think,
Very true.
because they are human. And even if you're famous, you're human and going to make mistakes, and it's just a gray area.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's easy for us to say what we would do until we're in that position.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, it's never been to the point of something so heinous. Uh, but also, my decisions don't affect your reputation and how people see you at your job, like they would with Seth Rogen.
Well, until our podcast gets really popular, right?
But by then we'll make enough money where we don't have to go to our jobs.
Right.
Ugh.
I know, like the whole Seth Rogen and James Franco, it really reminds me of Ashton Kutcher and Danny Masterson situation
Hmm.
because they grew up together too after being on that 70s show together. And then they were on The Ranch together, which Ashton Kutcher produced and I think helped write, played brothers. And I remember when all of these accusations against Danny Masterson came out, Ashton Kutcher actually killed his character off and wrote him off the show because those accusations were a lot more serious.
Yes, they were. And it's it's just so hard. Because I mean, I'm sure it wasn't hard because I feel like Ashton Kutcher has the moral compass that like this is not right. Like he cannot continue to have this platform even if he hasn't been found guilty yet. Because
Yes,
I feel like a lot of accusations there's some truth to most accusations.
I agree. Because Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore, they started this organization called Thorn. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So Thorn is an organization that Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore created in 2012 that helps fight child sex trafficking
Oh.
and helps protect children online and protect them from sexual exploitation. And that's pretty much exactly what Danny has been accused of, is using the Church of Scientology to rape women, especially young women, and
Ugh,
threatening them.
that's so gross, but there's a bunch of people that use religion or cults for have you heard
Hmm.
of like Nexum or something?
Yes, that's been
Yeah.
popping up a lot on my feeds lately.
We should do a podcast about that because
I would
that
like to.
I have watched at least two documentaries about it and I've read a bunch about it and
Have
it's
you seen that
crazy.
guy named Mark who claims to have cured his Tourette syndrome?
No.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll save that if we do an episode on it. It's
Okay.
insane.
Yeah,
But basically, he was on the news when he was a teenager because he got kicked off the city bus. I don't know if it was, I can't remember what state it was in, but it was a state where, there's a lot of multiculturalism. And he was saying the N word on the bus and he claims it was Tourette's, but he was on the H3 podcast trying to defend Andrew Tate recently, not knowing that Ethan Klein has Tourette's and not knowing that Ethan Klein is totally anti Andrew Tate. So H3 was kind of trolling him in a way. And he admitted, yeah, yeah, I was on the bus saying the N word, and the things that would come out of my mouth, it just changed depending on who I was with and like what would offend them the most. And it's like, that's not how Tourette's works. That's called just being an asshole.
oh my gosh.
I've
And
never heard of someone with Tourette's saying the things with verbal Tourette's, because again, not all Tourette's is verbal tics like that. That's actually very rare when people say inappropriate things. That type of Tourette's is very, very rare. But I've never heard of it changing depending on the group of people you're with.
and who just goes on a podcast without researching who they're going on?
That's what Ethan said when he finally like pulled the rug and like said, I have Tourette syndrome. The guy's, you should see the guy's face. He's
Good.
like, oh, what? You do? Did you say you have Tourette syndrome? And Ethan's like, yeah, you should have done some research, huh?
Because Ethan is very open about it. Like,
Yes.
ugh. And the fact that he is very anti-Andrew Tate.
Yes, what? Like this just shows what a dumbass this guy was. He was
Ugh,
just looking for any platform. I think with all the Nexum stuff coming out, because this guy Mark, I guess there was like a big Nexum documentary which I have not seen. I think it's
I've
on
seen some of
Hulu.
it, yeah.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But he's featured on that. And so I think he's trying to cover his ass and defend himself, and it's not working.
Well, good. It shouldn't work, especially if he's gonna pretend to have a serious like illness or,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know
Yeah.
if
He was going to like on tours being a motivational speaker about it.
that's so ridiculous. I love H3 podcast.
Me too.
Ethan Klein, if you hear this, we want to be on.
Oh, yes. Please.
Please. It's my dream. I'll
I don't
make up a
know.
story that it's my dying wish and I'm dying.
You're dying from Tourette's syndrome.
I'm dying from Tourette's, yes.
Very serious case.
I'm dying to be on.
Oh, well, yeah, that's all I really had to say about Yearbook. I mean, I could probably talk about every chapter because they're all great in their own way, but those were my favorites.
Well, I'm definitely gonna get it when I'm done with the book I'm listening to now. I'm listening to a thriller and it's really good. Because
Ooh.
the last two books I listened to were not podcasts, but were memoirs. So it's like I'm gonna change it up a little bit.
Ooh,
And
I've never listened to a thriller. How's that going? Does it feel
it's
scarier?
actually it doesn't feel super scary, but there hasn't been a twist yet. Like
Mm.
I just got to a twist and it's actually really good.
What's it
It's
called?
it's called The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher. It's really good.
Ooh, I'll add that to my list.
And I got it on Apple Books because with Audible, you subscribe and they give you a credit every month, but you can't buy more credits for 30 days. It's kind of not a hassle. I understand that it's probably so people aren't buying a bunch of books fraudulently and, on somebody else's card or whatnot, like all at once before they notice, because you can't get back digital media really. Um, but I bought it on Apple Books and it was only like $4.99,
Hmm,
which some books are expensive. I'm like $20,
I
and I
know.
don't even have a physical thing to hold.
That is really good because I have my Audible subscription too, and I like it. But one of the things I hate is how like all books are just one credit. Like there you can get the whole Chronicles of Narnia series, which is over 33 hours, and that's one credit. Whereas one chapter book that might only be 4 hours long is also one credit.
And I haven't been able to find any like super good books on their like free
Mm-mm.
catalog.
No.
I started one and I was like, "Ooh, this lady's voice is terrible." But the one
Yeah.
I paid for 4.99, her voice is pretty good.
That's good to know. I'll have to look at Apple Books more. I did get, so next week we're doing Beyond the Wand with Tom Felton, and I did get that on Apple Books. And I also got The Spare on Apple Books because they were both cheaper
Oh,
than Kindle, at least
I
when I
know.
bought them.
Yeah, I bought Beyond the Wand with my credit on Audible, and I bought the spare at Target, but I found the receipt and I was like, I could take it back and get the audiobook because I don't want to pay for it twice.
That's a good idea.
So I think I might do that because I have only read like the first 3 or 4 pages of the spare, so I think it would be fun to listen to, especially since I commute almost an hour each way.
I love that. That's a great idea.
And I
And
feel
yeah,
like I'm doing something when I listen to a book instead of just music.
plus I think that the fact that Harry did the audiobook for The Spare makes it so much better. I've heard clips of it because people are making fun of certain parts, but I love his voice.
I just love British accents.
Yes.
Call me wrong for fetishizing, but I don't want to be right.
Same.
I think that's all we have for tonight. I don't have anything else to say about Naya Rivera except rest in peace. She was
Mm-hmm.
very talented in singing and in acting, and she was very young, and that's sad.
Very.
And so was Corey, and
In a way, what a blessing that she wrote that book before she died, so that her life is preserved in a way, like her story is shared and preserved in a way, and her son will be able to read that someday.
that's so important. I didn't even
Hmm.
think of that. That's so sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I have nothing else to say either, except if you read either of these books or if you want to read them, let us know in the comments what you thought. Like we said, eventually we'll be able to do these as live streams so we can read your comments as they're happening and you can join the conversation. But we will definitely be checking the comments and replying and having those conversations down there. And then join us next week when we're reading Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. That one's going to be really good.
It is. I'm so excited to talk about it with you. I haven't talked about it since we have finished it because I don't want to spoil anything because I
Hmm.
want it to all be recorded on the pod. And thank you for coming to All the Tea We Cannot Sip podcast. Have a good
Bye.
night. Bye.